Hello everyone. Today we are diving into one of the most delightful comedies in English literature, Stoops to Conquer by Oliver Goldsmith. So, if you are looking to understand the drama clearly, join me as I break down the plot, explain the main characters, go over the important themes. Let's start. Stoops to Conquer by Oliver Goldsmith. Its subtitle is The Mistakes of a Knight. It is written in 1773. She Stoops to Conquer is a comedy of manners that makes fun of the differences between city and country people and of how appearances can be deceiving. It tells the story of a rich country girl who has to stoop or pretend to be lower class to win the heart of a shy gentleman. The play is full of humor, confusion, mistaken identities, and romantic entanglements, all happening in one exciting night. Prologue. The prologue is spoken by Woodward, a famous comic actor. He says that true comedy is dying and sentimental drama is taking over. He hopes that the new comedy or this play will bring back laughter. He compares the play to doctor's medicine that will cure sadness with 5 doses or 5 acts. He urges the audience to laugh and enjoy. Act 1, Scene 1. Setting: an old fashioned room in Mr. Hardcastle's house, a countryside mansion that looks like an inn to outsiders. Main characters in Act 1: Mr. Hardcastle, a traditional simple country gentleman who loves old things. Mrs. Hardcastle, his fashionable vain wife who wants to follow modern city trends. Tony Lumpkin, her mischievous son from her first marriage. Miss Kate Hardcastle, their intelligent and witty daughter. Miss Constance Neville, Mrs. Hardcastle's niece and Kate's close friend. Scene summary. Conversation between Mr. and Mrs. Hardcastle. Mrs. Hardcastle complains that they never go to London or meet fashionable people like others do. Mr. Hardcastle replies that he prefers old-fashioned values over modern vanity. He mocks how quickly city foolishness has spread to the countryside. Mrs. Hardcastle criticizes their boring life and the old stories Mr. Hardcastle keeps repeating. Talk about Tony Lumpkin. Tony is Mrs. Hardcastle's spoiled son. She thinks he is full of humor or fun, but Mr. Hardcastle says he is full of mischief and laziness. Tony doesn't study or behave well. Instead, he plays pranks, goes to the Three Pigeons alehouse, and hangs out with a foolish crowd. Mrs. Hardcastle defends him, saying he is rich and doesn't need learning. Tony's entry and exit. Tony rushes in, ignoring his mother's attempt to stop him from going out. He says he is going to the Three Pigeons pub for fun. His mother tries to stop him, but he drags her off, showing he doesn't respect her much. Mr. Hardcastle's thoughts. He says Tony and Mrs. Hardcastle spoil each other. He also complains about his daughter Kate picking up city habits after staying in town. Kate Hardcastle enters. Kate is dressed in fashionable clothes. Mr. Hardcastle complains that her expensive clothes are unnecessary, but Kate reminds him of their deal. She dresses fashionably in the morning and simply like a housewife in the evening to please her father. Talk of marriage. Mr. Hardcastle says a young man named Marlowe, son of his friend Charles Marlowe, is coming that day as a possible husband for Kate. Kate becomes nervous and says she might not like him. Mr. Hardcastle says Marlowe is wise, generous, brave, and handsome. Point to be remembered: young Marlowe is very confident when talking to servant women or lower class girls and not so confident with high class lady. But it will be wrong to say he is extremely shy and nervous when speaking to respectable high class women like Miss Kate Hardcastle. Kate's father, Mr. Hardcastle, says Marlowe is one of the most bashful and reserved young fellows in all the world. Kate reacts like, you have frozen me to death again. Kate dislikes the word reserved but still shows interest in meeting him. Miss Constance Neville enters. Kate Hardcastle tells Constance Neville she is nervous about meeting Marlowe. Constance Neville reveals that Marlowe is a close friend of her admirer Hastings. She also says Marlowe is shy and serious with respectable women but bold and flirty with lower class women. Kate gets confused and wonders how to handle such a man. Constance Neville's love story. Constance Neville is secretly in love with Hastings, not Tony Lumpkin, who is Mrs. Hardcastle's son. But Mrs. Hardcastle keeps trying to force her to marry Tony to keep her fortune in the family. Constance Neville pretends to agree with her aunt while planning to marry Hastings. Mr. and Mrs. Hardcastle represent the contrast between tradition and fashion. Tony Lumpkin is introduced as a comic and mischievous character. Kate and Constance are intelligent, practical young women. The theme of shyness versus boldness in love is introduced through Marlowe's character. This scene sets up the confusion that leads to the comedy of the whole play. Act 1, Scene 2. Setting: an alehouse, a village inn called the Three Pigeons. Inside, Tony Lumpkin is drinking and joking with local villagers, surrounded by punch, tobacco, and laughter. Tony sings a funny, carefree song mocking education, religion, and morals. He says good liquor is better than grammar and school. The crowd cheers for Tony, enjoying his jokes and free-spirited nature. Enter landlord with news. The landlord tells Tony that two well-dressed gentlemen in a post-chaise or carriage have arrived and are asking for Mr. Hardcastle. Tony guesses they must be Marlowe, his sister Kate's would-be suitor, and Hastings, his friend. Tony's mischievous plan. Tony decides to trick them. He tells Marlowe and Hastings that Mr. Hardcastle's house is not a private home but an inn. He also insults his own family, describing Mr. Hardcastle is a strange old man, and lies about Kate, calling her tall and ugly, and lies about himself, pretending to be smart and well liked. The confusion. Marlowe and Hastings are already lost and frustrated after traveling far. Tony gives them silly and confusing directions to make it seem like Hardcastle's house is a proper inn called Buck's Head. He says the landlord is friendly but pretends to be a gentleman. This is part of the joke because the landlord is actually Kate's father. Tony's trick. The landlord, his nickname is Stingo by Tony, realizes Tony is being mischievous and tries to stop him, but Tony says, "Mum," a signal to stay quiet. Marlowe and Hastings thank Tony and prepare to go to Mr. Hardcastle's house, thinking it is an inn. Tony is fun-loving, clever, and a prankster. Marlowe is polite but reserved, and Hastings is more open and talkative. Tony's trick sets up the main misunderstanding in the entire play. Marlowe and Hastings treat Mr. Hardcastle's house like an inn. They act rudely and casually. This causes confusion and comedy later. Tony tricks the guests and quietly laughs at how they will embarrass themselves in front of his own family, thinking it's just a normal inn. Act 2. Setting: an old-fashioned country house or Hardcastle's home. Hardcastle is training his rustic awkward servants like Diggory Rogar how to behave like polished waiters because important guests Marlowe and Hastings are expected. He is frustrated because they are clumsy, forget their roles, and talk too much. Diggory, in particular, is laughably blunt and honest. He says he cannot watch guests eat without wanting food himself. Hardcastle tries to instill discipline, but it's clear the servants are hopelessly unrefined. Comic effect. Their misunderstanding of manners adds farcical humor. The contrast between rural simplicity and urban sophistication becomes a theme. Arrival of Marlowe and Hastings. Marlowe and Hastings arrive at the house still believing it to be an inn as pranked by Tony. Hardcastle, unaware of this mistake, greets them with warmth. Marlowe, believing Hardcastle is the innkeeper, treats him with rudeness and arrogance. He asks for punch and supper rudely, comments on the house and food, and expects servant-like treatment. Hardcastle, confused by this behavior, is offended but still tries to be polite. Key dialogues. Marlowe. This is Liberty Hall, you know. Hardcastle, aside. This may be modern modesty, but I never saw anything so like old-fashioned impudence. Here, the main source of comedy is mistaken identity. Marlowe and Hastings talk about women. Hastings teases Marlowe about his timidity around upper class women, though Marlowe is confident and flirtatious with maids or lower class women. Marlowe admits his shyness and fear of speaking to modest ladies like Miss Hardcastle. Marlowe is bold with barmaids but bashful with ladies. Hastings is more balanced and rational. Miss Neville and Hastings meet. Miss Constance Neville meets Hastings in secret. She reveals this is her guardian's house, not an inn. They suspect Tony Lumpkin tricked the guests. They plan to elope to France as soon as she gets her jewels from her aunt, Mrs. Hardcastle. They agree to keep Marlowe in the dark about the mistaken identity to avoid ruining the plan. First meeting of Marlowe and Miss Hardcastle. Hastings introduces Marlowe to Miss Hardcastle or Miss Kate Hardcastle, who has dressed modestly to appear as a barmaid or lower class girl in order to test Marlowe's true nature. Hastings encourages Marlowe in an aside to just get through the first plunge. Dramatic irony is that Marlowe thinks she is a barmaid, the audience and Kate know she is a lady. This creates hilarious and revealing character moments. Family conflict. Tony versus Mrs. Hardcastle. Tony and Constance are forced to be engaged but both dislike the match. Tony insults Miss Neville, describing her as bad-tempered and fake. Mrs. Hardcastle scolds Tony and tries to show off the couple. Tony rebels, mocks his mother, and expresses his desire to be free. Mr. Hastings is in love with Miss Constance Neville, who is Mrs. Hardcastle's niece and Tony Lumpkin's cousin. Mrs. Hardcastle wants Tony and Constance Neville to marry, not because they love each other, but to keep Constance Neville's fortune and jewels inside the family. Mr. Hastings secretly proposes to take Miss Neville off Tony's hands by eloping with her. Tony happily agrees and even promises to help with the horses and jewels. This alliance is formed in secret outside Mrs. Hardcastle's knowledge. In Act 2, Marlowe thinks he is at an inn and treats Hardcastle badly. Miss Hardcastle or Miss Kate Hardcastle pretends to be a maid to test Marlowe's love. Hastings and Constance Neville plot an elopement. Tony helps the lovers unknowingly just to avoid marrying Constance Neville. Act 3. Hardcastle Soliloquy. Mr. Hardcastle is alone, grumbling about how modest Marlowe, his supposed engaged, actually behave like the most important piece of brass, which means the most shameless and bold young man he has ever seen. He had been told that Marlowe was a very modest and shy young man, but what he sees is completely the opposite. Marlowe behaves in a rude, bold, and disrespectful way. He acts like he owns the house, sitting comfortably in the easy chair by the fire, taking off his boots in the parlor, and asking Hardcastle to take care of them. So Hardcastle sarcastically says that Marlowe is not modest at all, but rather the most important piece of brass. Hardcastle worries what this rudeness will do to Kate's feelings since he is meant to be her husband. The missing jewels. Mrs. Hardcastle and Miss Constance Neville talk of Constance's wish to borrow her aunt's jewels for one day. Mrs. Hardcastle claims they are missing to keep Constance from wearing them. Constance Neville protests, but Tony whispers to his mother, "Tell her they are lost, and I will bear witness." Tony has actually stolen the jewels to help Constance Neville elope, and he cheerfully agrees to bear witness to their loss when his mother discovers it. Miss Hardcastle hears from her maid that Marlowe mistook her for the barmaid when he saw her in plain clothes. Kate resolves to keep up the disguise. She will dress and speak like a country barmaid. Her goal is to take him off his guard and see how he behaves when he thinks she is a servant. Marlowe and barmaid Kate. Marlowe frets about all the bowling servants and household bustle. Kate, in her barmaid persona, keeps popping up with, "Did your honor call, sir?" Marlowe turns away at first, then finally compliments her, only to discover her modesty is actually quite bold. He calls her vastly handsome and tries to kiss her. Dramatic irony. We, the audience, know she is his real fiancée. He thinks she is a barmaid. Hardcastle's discovery. Mr. Hardcastle bursts in just as Marlowe is cheekily addressing Kate the barmaid. He has outraged, "This is your modest lover, your humble admirer." Kate quickly assures her father, it's all part of her plan to test Marlowe's modesty. She asks for 1 hour more to prove that his impudence is only surface deep. Hardcastle, torn between anger and trust in his daughter, grants the hour, but warns sternly that no trifling is allowed. Act 4. This act is filled with confusion, deception, and revelation. It begins with elopement plans and ends with a moment of realization for Marlowe. The main themes are mistaken identity, class perception, and romantic misunderstanding. Hastings and Miss Neville plan to elope. Hastings tells Miss Neville that he has sent her jewels to Marlowe, who has the baggage keys. Hastings leaves to arrange horses for their escape. Miss Neville says She will continue to pretend to be in love with her cousin Tony to fool her aunt. Hastings trusts Marlowe with the jewels. The elopement plan is still secret. Marlowe is confused why Hastings gave him such a valuable casket. He gives the casket to the landlady to keep it safe. This shows his lack of judgment. He is still thinking about the barmaid, Miss Hardcastle in disguise, and believes she is in love with him. Marlowe unknowingly puts the jewels at risk and continues to misunderstand Kate's identity. Hastings learns about the jewels. Hastings meets Marlowe and asks about the casket. Marlowe says she gave it to the landlady. Hastings pretends to be calm but is shocked and worried because now the jewels might be lost. Marlowe jokes about it, showing his ignorance of the situation's seriousness. Hastings realizes that the plan may be ruined due to Marlowe's carelessness. Hardcastle confronts Marlowe. Hardcastle is angry about the rowdy behavior of Marlowe's servants, who are actually Marlowe's because he thinks it's an inn. Marlowe insists he instructed them to enjoy themselves since he himself doesn't drink. A drunken servant appears and talks nonsense, increasing Hardcastle's frustration. Hardcastle finally loses patience and orders Marlowe out of the house. Marlowe is shocked and refuses to go, thinking Hardcastle is just the host of the inn. Misunderstanding leads to major clash between Hardcastle and Marlowe. Miss Kate Hardcastle reveals the truth. Marlowe meets Miss Kate Hardcastle and finally asks about her identity. She tells him she is a poor relative of the Hardcastle family who helps around the house. Marlowe realizes he has been tricked. This is not an inn, and Mr. Hardcastle is a gentleman, not an innkeeper. He is deeply embarrassed and feels like a fool. He apologizes to Miss Kate Hardcastle and says he cannot marry someone of lower status, still unaware she is a gentlewoman. She pretends to be heartbroken and shows signs of real affection. Marlowe is touched but says he must leave, blaming society and his father's expectations. Marlowe begins to realize the truth but still doesn't know Miss Kate Hardcastle's real status. Tony and the letter from Hastings. Tony and Miss Neville are caught pretending to be in love to fool Mrs. Hardcastle. A letter from Hastings arrives, which contains the elopement plan. Tony cannot read it, and Miss Neville tries to stop his mother from seeing it but fails. Mrs. Hardcastle reads the letter and explodes in anger, realizing they were planning to elope behind her back. She decides to lock up Miss Neville and personally escort her to Aunt Pettigrew to prevent her escape. Mrs. Hardcastle discovers the elopement plan and takes control. The lovers despair and Tony thinks of a plan. Hastings, Marlowe and Miss Neville all blame each other and Tony for the mess. Marlowe is furious that he was kept in the dark and made a fool. Hastings is upset about the lost jewels and failed elopement. Miss Neville is heartbroken that her plan failed. Tony, after all the chaos, suddenly comes up with a plan and tells them to meet him at the garden gate with hope that he can still help them escape. Act 5, Scene 1. Sin City. The scene starts with Hastings learning that his plan has failed and ends with Miss Kate Hardcastle preparing to expose the truth to Sir Charles Marlowe and Mr. Hardcastle. Hastings learned Miss Constance Neville has been taken away. Hastings enters and speaks with a servant. Hastings asks the servant if Miss Neville and Mrs. Hardcastle have left. The servant confirms they left in a post-coast and Tony rode with them on horseback. Hastings laments, "All my hopes are over." The servant also informs Hastings that Sir Charles Marlowe, or Marlowe's father, has arrived and is laughing with Mr. Hardcastle about Marlowe's mistakes. Hastings exits quickly to avoid being seen heading to the garden gate where the elopement was planned. Hastings realizes his plan to elope has failed. He is heartbroken and leaves. Sir Charles and Hardcastle discuss about Marlowe. Sir Charles and Hardcastle are laughing over Marlowe's mistaken belief that the house is an inn. Hardcastle says he still expected Marlowe to recognize him as a gentleman, not an innkeeper. Sir Charles jokes, "He thought you were an uncommon innkeeper." Then they shift to happier matters. They both want Marlowe and Kate to marry. Hardcastle says that although Kate has a small fortune, she is a good match. Sir Charles says his son already has enough wealth and only needs a good wife. The fathers are ready for the marriage, but Marlowe is still unknown about Kate's real identity. Marlowe enters and creates confusion. Marlowe enters embarrassed and apologizes for his earlier insolence. Hardcastle brushes it off and tells him that a little laughter with Kate will fix everything. But when Hardcastle tries to hint about Marlowe's affection for Kate, Marlowe is confused. He insists, "I never showed her any affection." He says they only had one short, modest meeting and that he showed no interest. Hardcastle becomes annoyed, thinking Marlowe is being too modest or pretending. Eventually, Marlowe insists, "I saw the lady without emotion and parted with reluctance." He even asks to leave the house, saying he feels humiliated. Marlowe is talking about his formal meeting with Miss Hardcastle when she acted like a lady. But the audience knows he was very affectionate with her when she acted like the barmaid. This causes dramatic irony and confusion for Hardcastle and Sir Charles. Fathers are puzzled and Miss Hardcastle enters. Sir Charles is surprised. Marlowe sounded completely sincere. Hardcastle is angry, thinking Marlowe is arrogant. Then Miss Hardcastle enters. Hardcastle asks, "Did Marlowe express any love for you?" Kate says yes. Sir Charles asks, "Did you meet more than once?" Kate says yes. Sir Charles, "Did he talk of love?" Kate, "A lasting one." They are shocked. Sir Charles says, "That's not how my son usually behaves." Kate is describing the flirty, passionate Marlowe, but the fathers only know the shy, formal Marlowe. This contradiction confuses them. Kate's plan. Kate offers to prove the truth. She tells her father and Sir Charles to hide behind a screen and she will get Marlowe to confess his feelings to her. Sir Charles agrees and says, "If I find him what you describe, all my happiness in him must have an end." Kate responds privately, "And if you don't find him what I describe, my happiness must never have a beginning." Kate is risking everything to prove Marlowe loves her. She wants to show them the real Marlowe, the one who is tender when he thinks she is a barmaid. Act 5, Scene 2. Setting, back of the garden. Hastings waits and Tony arrives. Hastings is angry and impatient because Tony is late. He fears Tony betrayed him. Suddenly, Tony appears, covered in mud and tired from riding. Hastings is glad to see him and asks where Miss Constance Neville and Mrs. Hardcastle are. Tony's trick. Tony reveals that he has deliberately misled them by taking them in circles around the garden. They are not far away, but right where they started, near the horse pond behind the house. Tony's mother is exhausted and terrified, thinking she is 40 miles away from home. Mrs. Hardcastle's panic. Mrs. Hardcastle enters miserable and shocked. She believes they are lost in a dangerous place far from home. Tony plays along, scaring her by pretending there are highwaymen nearby. He ever tricks her into hiding behind a tree when Mr. Hardcastle appears. The big reveal. Hardcastle is puzzled to hear voices and discovers Mrs. Hardcastle hiding. She mistakes her own husband for a highwayman, kneels and begs for money. Hardcastle is amused and angry when he realizes she has been tricked. Tony admits everything and asserts his independence, leaving his mother furious. Tony says, "The Paris says you have spoiled me, so now take the results." Act 5, Scene 3. The final reveal. Hastings and Constance Neville return. Hastings and Miss Neville appear. She no longer wants to elope but will appeal to Hardcastle's sense of justice. Hastings is disappointed but supports her decision. They are ready to seek the elders' approval instead of running away. Marlowe's final declaration of love. Miss Kate Hardcastle prepares to expose the truth to Sir Charles and Hardcastle. She gets Marlowe to confess his deep love, even though he believes she is a poor barmaid. He kneels and says he cares nothing for money, status, or fortune, only for her. Behind the screen, both fathers hear the truth and are amazed. The truth is out. The fathers come out and confront Marlowe. Marlowe is shocked to find out the barmaid was actually Miss Kate Hardcastle, his proper bride. Miss Kate Hardcastle mocks him playfully for being shy with ladies of class and bold with barmaids. Happy resolutions. Hastings and Constance Neville are permitted to marry. Tony is declared legally of age, which means he can refuse the arranged marriage with Constance Neville. He does so loudly and proudly. Tony Lumpkin is his own man again. Marlowe is embarrassed but now truly loves Kate. With everyone reconciled, Hardcastle blesses their union. The play ends joyfully with Hardcastle planning a celebration the next day. Epilogue. Spoken by Miss Kate Hardcastle. This is a light-hearted poetic speech summing up Miss Kate Hardcastle's performance in the play. Miss Kate Hardcastle jokes that she stoops to conquer or pretended to be a barmaid and successfully own her husband. She wishes she could also conquer the audience with her charm. She reflects on a woman's life as a play. In Act 1, as an innocent country girl. In Act 2, bold barmaid. Act 3, flirt in town. Act 4, sophisticated wife. Act 5, elderly card-playing lady, who now pleads with the audience. So, life is a performance full of changing role, but love and honesty, even when hidden beneath tricks, always win in the end. Key themes of the novel: mistaken identity, class difference and marriage, appearance versus reality, role of women and wit, comedy of manners, and social satire.